Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Loftus Road. Norwich City have drawn here with QPR 1-1 this evening, a result that probably in reality doesn't do too much for either the survival prospects of QPR nor the playoff prospects of Norwich City. The positive probably really that Norwich haven't dropped points. They remain after the results tonight, 2 points from the top six after Coventry's goalkeeper equalised in the 95th minute to prevent them moving even further ahead. They do obviously have games in hand, and we will assess that race towards the end of this. But let's start with this game. I mean, for me, kind of really summed up where Norwich City are. It was an incoherent performance, really quite erratic, I felt, throughout the evening. The first half, if we break that down with what David Wagner tried to do, he tried to bring Isaac Hayden into midfield to free Liam Gibbs up to go and play in the 10. Hernandez and Marquinhos came central. That gave a little bit more width for Aarons and you knew this to try and bomb on and create kind of that 5 in attacking spaces and kind of 1 in each vertical zone that we know he likes to operate with. They were building up with Hayden dropping into the back 3. That left Gabriel Sara quite isolated really in his build up, as we've seen, and they kind of built up in a 3-1 in a 3-1-1-5 or whatever it is. Yeah, that's right, isn't it? Yes, that's right. A 3-1-1-5. And they struggled to progress the ball. They were slow. They were quite stodgy. They lacked, I felt, a little bit of cohesiveness. The spaces were too big, I felt, and that allowed QPR to drop long balls in behind them or between kind of midfield and defensive spaces, and allowed them to have a little bit more joy with that and probably make it a bit more of a wrestling match than Norwich City wanted. And I think there was that kind of, those gaps were proving quite costly. We saw with the goal, really, Elias Chair has so much space, not really closed down. I think Marquinhos is the guilty party. He doesn't engage him high enough, allows him to kind of just jink the ball onto his right foot and deliver a ball in. And again, so much space between the centre-backs. Gaps aren't tight enough. Lyndon Dykes swans in, is allowed to chest, and then obviously slots the ball past Angus Gunn for number 1. And from there, it kind of felt like it was going to develop into one of those nights for Norwich. They really struggled to get anything going. They felt quite over-reliant on El Hernandez to produce something. They were struggling to get players into the game and struggling to get kind of penetrate QPR, I guess. And for a lot of the first half, QPR were playing in Norwich's half, and they were able to kind of push the defensive line up onto the halfway line. And that meant their longer balls were shorter, if that makes sense. They could hit them with a little bit more precision and put them in areas that caused Norwich City problems. And Norwich were really struggling to grasp or grapple with that. They had a little bit of joy on the counter-attack, probably epitomised by Josh Sargent's chance towards half-time, where I think it was Gabriel Sara found him down the line. He shifted inside and hit a shot across the face of goal. But a really sort of grim first-half display. And again, after what we saw on Friday night, I don't really want to keep going back there. And various apologies and whatnot that we saw from players, to be in a position where they produced that performance and that level of performance in front of 2,200 Norwich fans here, for me, it left me feeling a bit underchanged. I'm sure shortchanged, sorry, and I'm sure it felt the same for them as well, because it wasn't the reaction that anyone wanted to see. And I said, I think pre-match, this kind of game felt like whoever was going to be a little bit more vulnerable. And actually in the first half, that looked like Norwich City. They really struggled to close the gaps that were building in their shape, particularly in possession. Marquinhos on the right was completely ineffective, and to be fair, really has been in the last few games. And they just lacked creativity. The only time they really looked like they were going to create something was through a transition, through getting on the ball and trying to drive up the pitch. And that, against the side, or when you have quite a significant amount of possession, is not really ideal. And a lot of it was really in their defensive third, and they're comfortable playing it there, but there's no one there. And maybe this is sort of lends into the lack of confidence that's in the group at the moment. And, to an extent that's understandable, but with the quality that they have, they should be able to play passes into forward players. They should be able for players to take ball on the half turn rather than being closed off and having to play backwards. There's just not that, a little bit of quality and a little bit of confidence that you need, that spark that you need to probably attack with penetrate teams and hurt teams. They didn't have that, and as a result, QPR were able to kind of implement their game and their style, made it a bit of a race. I think Lyndon Dykes was extremely effective tonight. Elias Chair was extremely effective, and it's the QPR side that got beaten 3-0 at home. Gareth Ainsworth's coming out afterwards and saying they're fragile and damaged. And Norwich City didn't really take advantage of that. And the only time they did was 2 minutes after the break, where real tenacity from Josh Sargent to go and win the ball in a key area of the pitch, drives, picks out a wonderful pass to Gabriel Sara. His low shot really should be held by Seny Dieng. He doesn't, and Adam Eder is alert, quick, sharp, probably all the things that maybe he hasn't been in recent weeks to latch onto that and tap in. Only his second goal of the season, his first goal under David Wagner. And from there, really, it felt like the momentum shift, and you probably expected Norwich City to go on and win the game because of all of those things I discussed about QPR, their vulnerability. The crowd here turned a little bit, but that didn't happen. QPR hung in. It became quite, as I said earlier, an erratic game, quite end-to-end. Players kind of not making particularly intelligent decisions. And I think this is maybe the thing with David Wagner. When you're so emotionally charged and you encourage that emotion to be channeled through your players, I think you can get this incoherent, chaotic brand of football at points where, you end up with 3 strikers on at the end. And that kind of felt like a little bit of a desperate hope for a goal rather than kind of a coherent plan. And yeah, I mean, beyond that, they didn't really create too much. If I'm being brutally honest, it didn't necessarily feel like they had the facilities to go and attack. QPR defended quite deep, particularly late on. It felt like they were pretty content with a point. But again, they even had chances to lose it. Angus Gunn had to make a fine save after Gabriel Sara's individual error. I think Chris Martin was the one who went through and did it again. So a game in the end where I'm probably stood here going, a point may be a fair reflection on it. I think QPR will be absolutely gutted they didn't find that second goal in that key period in the first half. They had a corner, I think it was, might have been a free kick. I think it was a corner that Jakob Sorensen has had to almost deflect onto the post to prevent it from going in at 2-0, which I think from there would have been a killer blow for this Norwich City group, to be completely honest. But yeah, I mean, it does nothing for either side, does it really? QPR, I think, although I think Luton may have equalised. Let me try and get the championship table in front of me. But it did at one point put them into the bottom 3. But I think Luton's equaliser may well just keep them on the right side of it. It does. So they're 21st, but they're still really embroiled in that relegation battle. Reading on 43 and QPR on 44. But more pertinently for Norwich, they remain, I think, have they climbed a place? I think they have climbed a place tonight. But that gap to 6th is 2 points. To put it in perspective, a goal here tonight, a winning goal, a win here tonight would have pushed them 6th. So that maybe shows how slight the margins are. But again, it's 1 win in 8, and it generally feeds into this kind of trend of missed opportunity and the feeling that you have that this group probably just does not have it in them to produce what they need to produce it from the remaining 3 games, which in my view, I said 4 from 4. It now needs to be 3 and 3. I think they've been let off the hook by results over this game week. But again, they cannot keep squandering these opportunities and missing out on those chances to go into the top 6, because you look at actually some of the teams. Millwall, for example, have Blackpool and Wigan. Look, football's a funny game. They're no guarantees at this time of the season, but there's a possibility that Wigan could get relegated. So again, that maybe shifts it. But you would expect them to take points from those 2 games. You'd probably expect them to take 6 points from those games. The way anyone's playing, I don't think you can expect anything, to be completely honest. But the fact they're still in the race is baffling, really, considering they've won 1 in 8. They got beaten heavily on Friday. They've come to QPR. They've picked up a point here tonight, which I don't necessarily feel is a good point. I think it's a point that maybe just toys with everyone and keeps the season alive for a little bit longer. But there are still questions. Does this group have the minerals to go and win 3 and 3? Do they have the minerals to beat Swansea at Carrow Road on Saturday? I'm not sure whether they do, and that probably is where we end up. We end up kind of speaking about all of the stuff that we spoke again on Friday night. So that's what makes this such a disappointing, for me, draw and such a missed opportunity, because there was a chance to break into that top 6, which, given what happened on Friday, was absolutely staggering, by the way. And again, it feels like they've kind of tripped over their own feet because of that first half performance. And again, they gave themselves so much work to do. And I think when you are in the position they are mentally, with the confidence, with the inexperience on the pitch, with the injuries, 2 goals was always going to feel like a tough ask. That being said, when they got Adam Eder's goal, they had the momentum. They didn't create the quality opportunities to win this game. And that's why probably in the end we're reflecting on a point for both sides being a fair result on the balance of the game, but not really good for either side. And I think both head coaches will be going back on their respective coaches and feeling really dejected about what they've seen tonight, because a win would have probably pushed QPR pretty close to safety, and a win, as I said, would have pushed Norwich into the top 6. So the fact that neither side has really come out of here feeling particularly pleased is something. And look, Norwich can now get obviously a maximum of 9 points from 3 games. That means it's 71 points, I believe, that they can get now. You have to bear in mind Millwall are on 65. That means they need 2 wins to get to that point. Bristol Rovers. Sorry, what am I talking about? That's a nice insight into what the season has been like. Blackburn Rovers, sorry, are on 64, but they have a game in hand. But I think everyone's looking at their fixture list and feeling that's a little bit tough. Does that count for anything at the moment? I'm not sure. West Brom 63, but they have a game in hand and they have Norwich to play. So that increasingly, we're probably looking at that West Brom game a week on Saturday as feeling like the decisive one, the one that may tell us, the one that may definitively conclude how this season ends. But at the moment, to be honest, it feels like kind of a cruel stalking of Norwich City's championship fortunes and playoff aspirations. And that, I guess, is the ultimate disappointment about tonight, because they had an opportunity to shift that narrative and change it and try and influence it positively, and they weren't able to do that. And that is why I think a lot of people will be reflecting on this point with a kind of glass half full mentality. Now, of course, you could flip that, and some people will be feeling this way. And after Friday night, remarkably, given the fact they've won one game in 8 now, they are still 2 points off the top 6. That is not an insurmountable gap, really. They could still make that up. Of course, feels like it's doing a lot of heavy lifting there, but it's very plausible. And that is where you feel, again, probably frustrated that it's as close as it is, and yet it feels so far away. And missed opportunity, wasted chances, ponderous possession. And I think Norwich have probably been made to pay for what was a pretty poor first half performance in truth. QPR have plenty of fighting spirit, but I think you saw why they are where they are in terms of qualities. Gareth Ainsworth basically made them not have the ball. They don't string passes together. It is essentially a lump forward and then they try and play off it, which is, it's a way of playing the game. It's not the way I would play the game, but it's a way of playing the game. Whether that's going to be good enough to get them out of trouble, I'm not sure. But again, I would file this with the points against Huddersfield, against Wigan. Probably I'd throw Stoke in there as well. And just not being great points. And games, if Norwich City would have won, you can probably file this into that category. If that was the case, they would be in the top 6. They would be looking ahead to a playoff campaign. They're not, and it isn't. And it's games like this here tonight and the fact and their inability to win them that probably makes it feel so difficult. A few bits around the game. Obviously, Isaac Hayden started his first game since Blackburn, I believe. Obviously, that ill-fated game involving Dean Smith. He's still not sure why fans turned on him, by the way. But he started. He played a significant portion of it. I felt there was a rustiness in the second half with some of his ball progression. There was a tackle on halfway. I didn't feel it was a red card. Gareth Ainsworth was incensed about it. He slid into Drew, but he has pulled out of it. And I think in the end, his shin has made contact. It wasn't even given us a free kick in real time, which is remarkable. It was probably a foul. It was probably a yellow card, but it wasn't. It wasn't a red in my view. And he was fine. Again, not great, not outstanding, but not awful. I think the erratic nature of this performance probably leaves me feeling as I was after Friday, that this group probably doesn't have enough to finish in the top 6, but maybe even tortuously, where the agony is being prolonged into the remaining 3 games. Swansea, obviously at home on Saturday, plenty of subplots there with Russell Martin making his first return to Carrow Road as a manager, and I've absolutely no doubt that he will be very, very keen to get one over on Norwich. Obviously, they beat Preston tonight, which means a win would take them level on points with Norwich. Their goal difference isn't great, so unless they win by a significant margin, they won't be able to actually leapfrog Norwich. But again, it would probably serve as what would be a pretty terminal nail in Norwich City's playoff coffin. So, I'm sorry I couldn't be more positive, but I don't necessarily feel like that's a great point. I personally, I said this in the team news video, so it's not me being wise after the event. I felt Norwich needed to win all 4. I felt they might possibly be able to draw 1 and then win the remaining 3. But I now feel that they have to win every game of the 3 remaining, and even then, that may not be enough. And that is where we're at. And I think all of the wider narrative about resets and change and overhaul and stuff, which we spoke about at length on Friday, that then becomes very real in the conversation. But I think ultimately Norwich City's fate could well be decided, if not on Saturday, certainly at the Hawthorns and West Brom, because if they win that game, then it's game on. And if they lose it, then I think it will be then officially done. So, we won't have to wait long for an answer, but feels like we're limping to the end rather than surging to the end. It's become less of a run-in and more of a stumble-in, I think. But there we go. From Loftus Road, thank you all very much for watching. Plenty more analysis and reaction, of course, at pinken.com. And obviously, we'll be at Carrow Road on Saturday, just 2 days before we're back again in the Championship for that game. Going to be a very different game, that one, against a Swansea side who's going to try and kill Norwich with possession. But we'll see how we go. Thank you very much for watching. Safe trip home to the 2 and a bit thousand who are here tonight. And we will see you again very, very, very soon.